You've become, whether you wanted to or not, arguably the most famous transgender woman on planet Earth. How has the whole process been for you?
Well, I've been able to live my life authentically for the last 2.5 years. Probably been the most rewarding 2.5 years of my life. It's also been probably the most challenging 2.5 years of my life. I had never met anybody else, although I was a trans person. I never met anybody else that was trans until I came out. So I had a lot to learn about the community. And it's been a very interesting ride. Just because I went through a transition, I didn't change. I'm still the same person I was before in so many ways, but I'm just so much more comfortable with myself today. It's been a long process. Back in the 80s, you don't just all of a sudden become trans. This is something that you live with your entire life. As a young child, I suffered with identity issues. Although back then in the 50s and 60s, I've been around a long time, you just kept your mouth shut about it. Back in the 80s, I thought for sure I couldn't take it any longer, and that I spent 6 years of my life actually thinking I was going to transition by the age of, before I turned the age of 40. And it was a really, really difficult time for me. It was probably the lowest I've ever been. And I got to 39 and I just couldn't go any farther. I say now, it wasn't time. And so I decided I got to get back into life. And about 6 months later, I met Chris. We hit it off from the beginning. I was very open with who I was. Probably played it down quite a bit because I knew I wasn't going to go through with this.
Well, what do you feel about Bruce now when you look back? That former persona you had?
I'm very proud of him. I liked Bruce. He was a good person. It wasn't all of me. There was so much more to me than that. But I remember, I got involved in sports, and it was my way to kind of divert myself from who I was and never knowing how far I would go with it. But, in life, you kind of look back on things. And I look back on that performance and that life that I was living at the time, and I was totally obsessed with winning, totally obsessed with proving myself. I trained 6 to 8 hours a day. I drove myself so hard. I got in the competitions, and my head worked. It was more important for me to win. Why? Because when I was growing up, I was, a dyslexic kid, suffered from low self-esteem, that I thought everybody else was smarter than me, and those words just didn't come up off the piece of paper like everybody else. And also, I wouldn't tell anybody, but I also had identity issues and gender issues, and I had all these things going with me. And I think because of that, I became so obsessed with trying to prove myself as a man, as a person, and legitimize myself to myself, that one of the reasons I was standing up there that day is because of all these other things that were going on in my head, and I had to prove myself. I remember the next morning waking up, and I didn't have a stitch of clothes on. It was in the bathroom, and the medal was sitting there on the counter. And I picked it up and I put it on, and I looked in the mirror and I said, "Oh my God, what do I do now?"
Amazing.
What's my next distraction going to be? And fortunately, I found, I got into business and TV and family and all those other things. So I found other distractions from myself about who I was.
You certainly found probably the biggest distraction imaginable, the Kardashian family, now the most famous reality family on Earth.
My kids, especially Kendall and Kylie, who I spend a lot of time with, and the Jenner side I spend a lot of time with, have been nothing but supportive. And from that standpoint, it's been great. But the Kardashian side, honestly, I really don't talk to them very often. And so I just kind of deal with that. Fortunately, I have a lot of children.
I mean, Caitlyn,
Yes.
the truth is that some of them have reacted quite badly to your book. and don't like some of the things you said, notably Chris and Kim. We know that because they've said it publicly. What is the relationship between you and
Yes.
Chris? I mean, does Chris feel, as she seems to imply, slightly cheated by what she perceives to be a slight double life perhaps you were leading that she wasn't entirely aware of?
I don't know. See, in that family, if you noticed in the show, I always kept my opinion to myself. I was living in a house with many very opinionated women. And so even in the show and everything, I was always kind of in the background, and I kind of kept my mouth shut. The book was my story. It was my opinion on a way a lot of the things happened. And it was honest. And I was, and continue to be, extraordinarily proud of the book. It's done very, very well, The Secrets of My Life. And unfortunately, the Kardashians, and particularly Chris, didn't react that way. I went overboard to be nice, to be friendly, to be open, but also tell my story and my side of the story. And so I really haven't talked to, since the book came out, I've never talked to Chris again. Kim, I haven't talked to in 6-9 months, whatever
Kim,
it is.
Caitlyn.
Kim, I love Kim. She's a great person. I have such respect for her as a mother, as a business person. But like Chris, I mean, she is, you know, very opinionated. And, but that's okay. I love that about her. It's unfortunate because actually Kim was the first one I talked to about this issue. She was very straightforward with me. When I, for about 2 years, was getting destroyed by the tabloids, they've been destroying me forever. And they were coming up with all of these things. Kim one day comes up to me and says, you know, well, what the heck is going on? And Chris and I were still together, and I said, hey, you want to know? She had her own house. I said, I'll come over to your house, just the two of us, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. And she was actually, she's been very, very good on it. And it's a big loss in my life, not having her there anymore. And to me, I mean, that's sad. I love all my children.
Caitlyn?
I raised them. I spent
Caitlyn?
almost 25 years of my life with all these kids.
Caitlyn?